Talks. I want to welcome my guest, Maria Shriver. Maria, it's great to see you.
Thank you for having me.
So Maria Shriver is a mother of four, an Emmy and Peabody award-winning journalist, a 7-time New York Times bestselling author, an NBC News special anchor, and the founder of the Women's Alzheimer's Movement. So Maria, I think you added, I heard through the grapevine that you added a new paragraph to your resume and a new family member.
Yeah, I have to change the introduction there, and a grandmother of one, right, or two. So I have to add that in.
How do you like that so far?
I like it, but my daughter is very strict with her COVID protocol. So she's like, unless you're tested, you don't get to touch the baby. So
good way to go.
I look from, usually a couple feet away, but it's obviously it's a blessing to be alive to experience that. And, I hadn't given it much thought, like in my life, what would that be like? But then all of a sudden there it is. And you're like, wow, that's something to see your daughter hold her daughter and think about the circle of life, think about your life, think about aging, think about birth, think about what you wish you would have known, what you could have done differently, what you're glad you did exactly as you did, all of those things. So kind of all those big questions and thoughts, which are kind of always going on in my head, unfortunately. But they come, they're really bubbling when you see a grandchild.
It's great. Well, I want to ask you about your experience growing up. I would imagine everybody would want to know what it would be like to grow up in your family and what that was like. I can't imagine that there was any pressure to do anything with your life growing up a Shriver and a Kennedy.
Yeah, it was its own unique experience. It's kind of hard to explain to somebody unless you were in it. You don't really totally understand it, which is why I think I have a bond with my cousins that's so unbreakable, because, when you go through something like that with other people, you kind of adopt your own language and you have similar experiences. And also, it depends on the age you are, right? So kind of the older cousins had one experience that was in the early 60s, and like my brother, who's 10 years younger, doesn't even know what I'm talking about. So, but it was, my parents were extraordinary. They believed that they could change the world, that they were here to change the world, and that you were too, whoever you were. So whether you were an 8-year-old friend who came over, they would be questioned as to what they were doing to change the world, and they wouldn't come back unless they were doing something. And it just went on like that. And my parents kind of just thought that that was normal. So they were very driven. They were restless. They were determined, and they expected as such from their kids.
What inspired you to be a journalist? How did that bug start in you?
Well, I just wanted to get away from them, actually. That part. Now, I think everybody in my family was either going to law school or they were contemplating a career in politics. And when my dad ran for vice president in 1972 with McGovern, I was assigned to sit in the back of the plane with all the journalists. And it seemed to me that those were the people that were actually having some fun. They were basically dictating to the American public what was going on in the front of the plane. And they were telling people what to think of the people in the front of the plane. So I thought, this is really interesting in the back of the plane. They were having fun. They were driven. They were having an impact on the world as we knew it. And they were telling stories. And so I thought, and they were in a profession that changed every day. And so that felt like me. And so I decided, sitting in the back of the plane, which was predominantly men, and I had all brothers and grew up with male cousins and stuff. I was like, I feel comfortable back here. I get these kind of people. I get this kind of energy. And I think I can do well in the back of the plane.
Also, it seems to me, having been around you a bit, that you also have just an innate and unquenchable curiosity. I would
Yeah.
think that that had something to do with it too.
Yeah, I do. My kids are always like, oh my God, can you like not interview the Starbucks barista? Can you, uh, but I'm always fascinated, whether it's the guy parking your car or the barista or the person I'm interviewing. I kind of think everybody has a story, and I'm always interested in how somebody got to where they are, and what they've overcome, what they've struggled with, what they what moves them. I've always been that person. I've always been someone who was interested in that. And then I like then telling the story of the person that I met. So journalism fit me that way. And I thought it was a good forum to inform people, but also to inspire them. I thought, wow, if you could tell beautiful stories that people thought were going to be one thing, but actually turned out to be something else, you could actually change a person's point of view, change their mind, inspire them to join in or do something different. And you could have as much effect as the people who are the quote political leaders, um, as the people that I grew up with. That was kind of, and I also really wanted to do my own thing. I didn't just want to follow everybody in my family doing exactly what they were doing. I felt like, I don't know if it was because I was an only girl or what it was, but I just wanted to find my own path and carve it out. And so journalism gave me a path out of my family, out of the East Coast, and into my own life.
I know that your father's diagnosis and passing from Alzheimer's had a profound effect on you.
Mhm.
Can you talk about that, especially because he was such an amazing, vibrant, huge person? Can you talk about what that was like for you?
Well, I think it was, he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's in 2003, and he was by far the most intelligent human being I'd ever met or had ever seen kind of operate out in the world. He had a mind like an Encyclopedia Britannica. He was so smart, so creative. And so to watch somebody like that kind of dissolve or disintegrate in front of one's eyes, and not know, when they point to you, what's that? And you're like, wow, or when they pick up a spoon, and what's this? And you like, that just, if that doesn't kind of blow your mind, if that doesn't make you curious, back to curiosity about the brain and how it operates and how it could at one point be so clear and so smart, and then all of a sudden that same brain can't retrieve anything. And so it led me on a path to trying to understand what this disease was, how it formed in the brain, who got it, why they got it. And the more questions I asked, the more curious I became, the more confidence I built up in the space, and the more I pushed the envelope in the space. So when I began to see more and more women diagnosed, and then I would ask researchers and doctors, I think more and more women have Alzheimer's than men, they would say no. And I'm like, I don't know about that. I'm going to push on that. And did a big report in partnership with the Alzheimer's Association to the nation, where we uncovered for the first time that Alzheimer's disproportionately impacted women. 2/3 of those who got and get Alzheimer's are women, particularly also women of color. 2/3 of all the caregivers in our country are women. And so it brought my work with women also to the front. And I was noticing women dropping out of their careers to care for people, dropping out because they were getting Alzheimer's. So it was this kind of full circle. And at the same time as my dad got Alzheimer's, my mom started to have strokes, break her hips. And so between the two of them, and then once again, being an only girl with four brothers, and I found myself as a caregiver, as a first lady, as a mother of four small children, and overwhelmed. And I knew I had money and opportunity. So I was like, wow, there's a lot going on here, and there's a lot I can do to help people who aren't as fortunate as I am in this space.
I know when this happened to your family, you looked around for resources to help your children understand what
Yeah.
was going on, look for books on the subject, and there weren't any books
Yeah.
on the subject.
Yeah, there weren't. So I wrote one. I wrote a book called What's Happening to Grandpa. It was a children's book. And it was a way of explaining to my kids and their cousins what was happening to their grandfather. But it was also a way for me to explain to myself and to my siblings what was happening to my father. And in a way, what I learned from the process was that it was somehow easier for my kids to accept my father in the state that he was in than it was for me and my brothers, because I remembered him, going to the Hill to testify for the war on poverty, for Head Start, for Job Corps, starting the Peace Corps. I remembered that man, and they were just like, "Here's Grandpa. Let's accept him for who he is and where he is." And I struggled to put the two Sergeant Shrivers together, and they didn't. And so I kind of tried to follow their lead. Um, in dealing with my dad, to try to kind of settle down and just accept the man that was in front of me and stop trying to make him the man that he was. So when he would, play with blocks, I would be like, "Oh, okay." They would just play with the blocks and I would be like slower to the party. I was just like, wow, I can't kind of get over this. But then I would come around. But they were in many ways my teachers.
You mentioned the women's Alzheimer's movement. Can you talk about what inspired that for you, and what you're trying to do with that organization?
Yeah, well, what inspired the women's Alzheimer's movement was the report that we did to the nation, which reported that women were disproportionately impacted by Alzheimer's and that no one was looking at women and no one was researching women, or very few people. So we started a nonprofit to try to answer the question, why women? What is happening to women? And to fund research into women's brains, to try to look in places that researchers hadn't looked, and to encourage researchers around the country to look at women and to drop the belief that this disease just impacted women more because women lived longer, but to actually look at women in their 40s, in their 50s, in their 60s, and figure out what's happening to women that's causing this disease to kind of percolate for 20 years and then become evident in late 60s and 70s. And so that brought us to looking at women who are perimenopausal, women who are menopausal, to look and fund research into hormones, and to really understand that women's brains and men's brains are different. And now that doesn't mean, I say all the time, it's not sexist to fund research into women's brains. It's you go where the majority of cases are and you want to catch up because there's been so little research done. So that's what we've tried to do there. And it's also been a big movement to educate women about brain health. I think most people, certainly when we started, weren't aware that there was such a thing as brain health, weren't aware that you could take a cognitive assessment test. They weren't aware that there were certain foods you can and cannot eat that affect your brain health, affect the way you think, how you can remember things. They didn't know what the pillars were of a brain healthy life. So the women's Alzheimer's movement has been about educating and empowering women with that kind of information. So at the root of it, it's journalism, disseminating the information, and then giving it to you. This is what you need to know. This is what you can do that will help you or help the life of someone who's impacted by this disease.
Fantastic. The task forces. You're the chair of the governor's task force on Alzheimer's.
And you're on it.
I am on it. We spent some time together there.
Yeah,
and there's a parallel task force on a master plan for aging
right.
for the state of California. Can you talk about those task forces and what it means? One, that the governor of California is that interested in aging warms my heart and soul. And then also, where do we lie now in terms of how, we started the year with a surplus and we're ending the year with a deficit? Do you still have hope that there is positive change that will come of those things?
Yeah, I definitely have hope, because it would be a disaster if we didn't do something, right? Because first and foremost, California is aging. It's an aging state. And I don't think people think of California that way. They think of California the way it's marketed, right? It's the, Silicon Valley, Hollywood, land of dreamers, but it's actually a graying state. I think we've seen in the last 6 or 7 months, we've seen that it's a state affected by climate change. It's a state affected, by COVID. It's a state affected by fires. It's a state that is affected by an incredible deficit in its overall budget, but it's also affected. We have more people with Alzheimer's than any other state in the nation. We have more people who are caregivers than any other state in the nation. So we need a master plan on aging. It's just a fact. And I think what we've learned from COVID is that when we don't invest in science, when we don't invest in what we know will be the future, we're going to be playing catch up all the way through. So the governor put together a task force on aging, and he put together a task force on Alzheimer's. And our kind of charge was to come up with big, bold, and brave recommendations for the path forward. What will it look like for people to age in California? Will you be able to afford to age here? Will services be accessible for you? Will they be multilingual? Will they be in rural areas as well as in populated areas? Will there be caregivers here? Will you be able to navigate the system? Will we be able to be on the cutting edge of research? Will we be able to follow the research? There were so many things that we looked at on the task force, as you know. And we found that as we went through the year that there was some overlap between the task force that the governor had put together on aging. And I think that's where my work as First Lady was beneficial, because I was like, we have some overlap here. Let's go to Sacramento. Let's get these two kind of powers that be at the same table and talk about that we have overlap, and therefore assign certain things to the master plan on aging and keep what might be just particular to Alzheimer's and prevention and standard of care, et cetera, to the Alzheimer's task force, and have them work collaboratively because also Alzheimer's is a disease of aging. So I'm really proud of the way we've done that. I'm really proud of the recommendations that we've come up with. We tried not to skip a beat when COVID came around. We moved over to Zoom. I was really adamant that we stay the course because I committed to the governor that we would take a year. We would go up and down the state. We would talk to people from all walks of life, and we would give him big, bold, and brave recommendations. And I wanted to stay on that timetable. So it looked much better when we started than it does today. That's the truth. But that doesn't mean that we were going to give up, or that we were going to say like, we're not going to be able to recommend these things, because no matter what we have, they're going to have to be implemented. They may take longer. They may, be, some are low-hanging fruit, some are high-hanging fruit, some are simple, some are complicated. And we've put them together in a way that we try to do the simplest ones first and the cheapest ones first, but also to stress that these things have to be done no matter what anyway, because the numbers are there. The families in the millions are struggling. And California really has no choice. So, and I think we've learned from COVID that, and you would know very well, that we've had a problem with all the nursing homes. There has been, a lot of problems with people who've had COVID, who've had continued brain fog, trying to understand what that is, trying to understand. You have a lot of people now saying, I don't want to put a loved one in a nursing home because of what we saw with COVID. What are the safeguards we have for caregivers given these kind of situations? So I think COVID has been a learning experience, not just for the state of California, obviously for the whole country, but I think it's been a big learning experience for everybody about different age groups and how they process different experiences in life. And I think actually that's been a good thing, because I think that has brought people to think about their parents in a different way, I know certainly in my own home, you know, my son moved into the house with me. He's like, "You're vulnerable. I have to move home. Oh my God, you're going to die." I'm like, "What? Time out." I was like, "I'm not vulnerable." Because you are, look here, the age group, you know, you're in the vulnerable age group. And so it actually gave us an opening to talk about aging, about who's vulnerable, who's not, what does that mean? How do I want to get older? Is that the term I want to use? What does it mean? I just did a big event yesterday for the Scan Foundation, and they asked people, how do they want to get older? What does getting older mean to them? And I was struck by how many people said, you know, I want to be independent. I want to have my dignity about me. I want someone to be there to care for me. And I think, you know, we need a big conversation around aging, around what each decade looks like for the individual and for the family, the community, the city, the state, the country at large.
Yeah, and that brings up the idea of ageism for me. I mean, one of the things we've
Yeah.
talked about in the task force is how do we do some type of a media campaign to bring this issue to light, and this issue being Alzheimer's issues to really being about aging and ageism. You know, Bill Maher on a show a couple years ago said that it's the one acceptable ism left because it's okay to make terrible jokes about older people, and it's not okay. So you're a journalist,
Really?
and
Bill Maher said that? Wow.
yeah, well, yeah, and you know, you're a journalist, and you have always talked about how journalism and telling our stories can inspire people. How do we inspire people to attack this idea
Well,
and
I
put
think,
ageism to bed?
yeah, I think that we're all ageist to a degree, right? I mean,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think, you know, we have this conflict within us that we don't want to get old, but we hope we get old so we can be around to see our kids and our grandkids, but we don't want to look old. We don't want to act old. We don't want to be frail, but we want to be around. We want, you know, so this, you know, kind of tug of war, I think, going on inside of all of us. And I think first it's to recognize that we have it. So not to say, oh, like, why is that person ageist? I'm not ageist. I think I haven't met anybody who isn't ageist, right?
yeah, yeah,
So I think kind of naming it, owning it, and then say, like, why are we like that? What is that? And is it because we don't have examples of people who are aging well? And so we look at Dr. Fauci, or we, like, I say to myself, he's 79, he's running, he's walking, he's on top of his game. Isn't that what we want to be? And then we see, you know, Joe Biden out there, we see Trump out there, and we see Trump being an ageist on Biden, who's 3 years older than him. And so it's I think we don't have a built-in respect for that, you know, process. I think how we talk about people who are, quote, aging, how we see people who are still, you know, Warren Buffett at the top of their game, Frank Gehry, 90, still designing the most creative and innovative museums in the world, Fauci, Biden, even Trump, they're all in their 70s and they're at the top of their game. So, but we call them old.
yeah.
Or we say, like, uh-oh, they're old. What does that mean? Uh-oh, they're old. Instead of, like, they're old, they have experience, they, you know, that's something to admire. Don't we all want to be kind of in our 70s and 80s, or like Frank Gehry in their 90s? Yeah, I want to be like that. You know, I want my kids to look at me and see that. I want that. And so, you know, would I like to be that and look like I'm in my 20s? Yeah, but, you know, what are we going to do about that, right? So I think we all, you know, first is recognizing it, as they say in therapy, naming it. And then once we name it and recognize it and own it, it kind of loses a little bit of its hold or grip on us. And then calling it out when we see it and when we hear it, and confronting it, I think, in every way, shape, and form.
Yeah. Can you talk about the summit that WHAM has coming up?
Yeah, we have a summit.
Right.
I know you've advertised it, so thank you. That's great. And this is the second time we've done it. And we, have panels on Alzheimer's, on prevention, on brain health, on caregiving. So people get to ask questions. They get to hear from leading scientists about what's new, what's cutting edge, what they can do in their day-to-day life. We unveil different guides that, what you need to know to ask your doctor. So many people go, I don't even know what to ask my doctor about. What do I ask for? What should I be doing? So we give out that kind of information. They're really chock full information summits that I think leave people, one, inspired, two, hopeful, and really educated. And that you can go out of that and you can go to your kitchen table or go to a dinner table or go to a Zoom and be educated and be the most educated person on the Zoom or in
Fantastic.
or in your what is it, telemedicine visit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know you have limited time today, but last question is back to the media, and you're always have been behind the idea that journalism can inform and inspire.
Yeah.
The media has been under attack.
Yeah.
For the last few years. So where do we go from here? How does the media continue to inspire, even though it seems like on a daily basis it's dragged into the bowels of God only knows what?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's I think everybody's a little bit responsible for that. Those in the media, certain people who are in political life today who drag the media into the gutter to try to pick a fight with them, and then the media picks the fight with them. So I heard, I was watching the news last night, and I heard the president of the United States call people bastards. And sitting alone in my family room, I let out a gasp. I was like, oh, and he was talking about the media, and I put my hand over my mouth. I was like, I could not believe that we were in that place, in that space.
Not something your uncles would say.
I mean, it was so foreign to me to see that. And I think, so do you need to report that? Yeah. Do you need to engage in it? I don't think so. I think sometimes you just report it, leave it, and let people decide. And I think sometimes the media has engaged in the brawl, gotten its back up. And so I think that we're in a dysfunctional relationship, and somebody needs to put the boundaries up, take a step back and say, this isn't healthy for anybody. And I hope that change is going to come. I think, the media, when I was going into the media, they gave you a huge binder like this big when you went in that, here's the do's and the don'ts. You are not here to give your opinion. You are here to be an objective journalist. People don't care what you think. You tell a story. I'd love to see us get back to that. I'd love to see us. I look for when I don't want to hear the person reporting the news tell me what they think. I don't care. I want them to tell me the news and assume I'm smart enough to make up my own mind about what I'm seeing. And they should show me both sides. So I think we can all take a step back. We can all, regain our footing. I think, there needs to be reform in politics. There needs to be reform in the media. I think there needs to be reform in, the judicial system, the police system, the Catholic Church, you name it, and I don't think that change should scare us. I think I'm always afraid of people who are too afraid to change. I'm afraid of people who haven't looked in the mirror and had the guts to say, I need to wake up. I need to get awake. I need to evolve. Those are the people that scare me. The ones that do it don't scare me. So I think that we should all be wanting to reform. And I think we should all be in every institution across the board. And these institutions are living and breathing, right? So they should be evolving too. And I think there are some things that the media did really well that have been dropped by the wayside that we can regain and go back and move forward with. That makes sense.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Maria. I appreciate your being on the show. It's always a pleasure to see you,
Thank
and
you, Ken.
continued good work and good grandmothering.
Yeah, thank you very much. As I said, I consider myself blessed to have that experience, and I hope I get a lot more to practice that. I'm going to be a really good grandmother. I'm sure I'm going to be the one that, you know, like I just leave her here with me, and we'll take it from here.
I would agree with that assessment.
Get me back on a sugar high, but I'll definitely have fun in the process.
Very true. And for our audience, the next show on November 24th at 11 a.m., we have Dr. Thomas Cudjoe from Johns Hopkins talking about his latest research on isolation and loneliness, which will blow your hair back. An amazingly smart guy who talks about those important issues really, really well. So everybody tune in for that. Right. Maria, thank you so much.
Have a great day.
Hope to see you soon.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.